Okay, welcome everyone to caring for our precious LGBTQ plus mental health. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division with my partner Donnie Jokum, who is not here with us. But it's a queer bookstore that we founded back in 2012 and that has been hosted by the LGBT Center in Manhattan on 13th Street since 2014. And of course, we've been closed for about a year now, but we've been doing virtual events like this one. And we also launched an online store, which I'm going to ever so quickly share with you. So you can see that. So if you go to our website, you can choose from the menu and do that, or you can just go to bgsqd.com store. And at the top, you'll see you can choose books by category, zines, gift cards. And if you go down, you'll see some books featuring our panelists. And those are all 15% off till midnight tonight, or probably till tomorrow morning, because I'm not going to stay up. But yes, you can certainly buy those books supporting our authors and also supporting the bookstore. And we have almost 500 titles up there now. So there's a lot going on and we're going to keep adding. And we also love recommendations. So if there's a book that you think we definitely should have, by all means, let us know. All right, so I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to introduce Teresa, who is the person I reached out to say, hey, I think we need some mental health events at the Bureau. And thankfully she said yes. So I'm going to introduce Teresa. Theresa Thiafenow is a program director and psychotherapist at a geriatric mental health nonprofit and is editor-in-chief at the Affirmative Couch, affirmativecouch.com. She identifies as a peer as well as a clinician and is co-editor of the 2019 anthology Headcase, LGBTQ writers and artists on mental health and wellness, which we had a lovely event with the other editor, Stephanie Schroeder, who's in the audience, which was really great. So please give it up for Teresa and let's get started.
Thanks so much, Greg. And I'm so excited that Stephanie Schroeder and her partner, Lisa Haas, are in the audience tonight. I'm really glad you're both here. The last time I was doing an event at the Bureau, it was with Steph. So thanks for having us back, albeit not both presenting tonight. In any case, I want to thank everybody here for joining us tonight. I was really thrilled when Greg broached doing a queer mental health event because advocating for affirmative LGBTQ plus mental health care is my passion, and examining and discussing the intersections of clinician and peer identity and really breaking those open to help eliminate shame and stigma feels more necessary than ever at a time like this. So I'm deeply grateful to have several wonderful panelists here with us tonight, some of whom carry this dual identity of provider and peer. That is, people who both give care and who are or have been recipients of care or have lived experience with mental health conditions, which is not to say that everybody on the panel identifies that way, but some do. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and share briefly a little bit about who they are and what they do in the world. So I'm going to start with the person I see immediately to my right, who is Geleni, if you would not mind telling us a little bit about yourself.
I'm just first so thrilled that not only to be part of this and to have been invited by you, Teresa, but also to have remembered to unmute myself so that I have a little modicum of grace in my tech challenged life. Hi, everybody. I'm so very happy to be here. I definitely identify as a peer and feel very much connected to being part of this conversation with everybody, and also just really proud to be sharing the space with all of you. So I'm Geleni Fontaine, they, them, and I'm a fat, queer, trans, non-binary, disabled, Latinx New Yorker. I'm someone who was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And I've done all of my work from this place. I'm also somebody who was gentrified out of my home a few years back. So I've been dealing with a lot of the aftermath of that. attached to the pandemic. I'm a holistic healthcare healer, an acupuncturist, and also a registered nurse. And I have also a history of doing different kinds of violence prevention work and training with youth and adults, survivors, queer folks, and people with disabilities, and BIPOC community. So what I notice about all the different kinds of work that I've done is that it all kind of comes together around healing. And it feels really good to be sharing, in this conversation, just in the midst of those intersections that are so important. Um, I know that as someone who is missing seeing the folks that I would be treating on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, and trying to have some sessions with folks online. And as an acupuncturist, it's a little bit harder because so much is very hands-on. That I've been in touch in some different ways with people. And what I found myself doing most recently, and probably in the past 6 months, is teaching tapping and acupressure to folks in different workshops in different settings through Third Root Community Health Center primarily, which is the place that I'm most affiliated with right now. And it feels really good to be able to offer something that's just a sustainable basic practice that's like a tool that you could put in your pocket and then pull out when you need it. And what I found is more than ever, it's something that I'm doing for myself and something that I'm sharing with family and friends, and then also with community. So it feels really good to be here and able to provide some of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Geleni. We are so excited to have you lead a mini session at the conclusion of the panel discussion this evening. Can't wait. I see Jia next to you. Jia, would you like to make a brief introduction?
Hi, I'm Jia. My pronouns are they, them, she, her. I am a Black non-binary femme from the South Bronx of New York City. I am a project director of Fearless Femme 100, which is a community project focused on providing peer mental health services to queer and trans BIPOC folks. I'm also a community organizer, and I have experience in program management and also have an interest in the arts. So there you go.
Thank you so much. A real Renaissance person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, right next to Jia, I see Isabel.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot, Teresa, and thank you, Greg and the Bureau for holding this event and having me. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Isabel Restrepo, pronouns she, her. I'm a licensed social worker, and I'm the director of a psychiatric rehabilitation program that serves adults diagnosed with severe and persistent mental illness. So personally, I've been in the mental health field for about 20 years. It's just about to be 20 years. And I also do identify as a clinician with lived experience, carry my own set of diagnoses. Um, and just a little bit about some of my other intersectional identities. Identify as queer, butch, Colombian immigrant, and a woman. And I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm happy to learn from the other panelists and from everyone that is in the virtual room today.
Thank you, Isabel. Okay, and last but definitely not least, Max.
Hi, y'all. My name's Max Reynolds. I'm a rabbi and a board-eligible hospital chaplain. I work in palliative care, providing existential and spiritual support to people who are in the hospital and their loved ones and networks around them. So not entirely end-of-life care, a lot of end-of-life care, but a lot of just sort of general, like, what's it like to live with a ton of pain? What's it like to be living with a lot of chronic illnesses, very serious ones? I'm definitely a peer. I'm a trauma survivor. I moved to New York in 2003, so I've been here for quite a long time now and very much identify as a New Yorker. I'm working class and trans, first in my family to go to college. And Prior to becoming a rabbi and a chaplain, I was doing supportive case management, primarily at Callan Lord, but also Housing Works and the Attic Youth Center in Philadelphia. My other parts of my life that are relevant are that I'm a writer, mostly fiction, and sort of like creative nonfiction-y stuff, and part of the What Would a HIV Doula Do collective. I'm really excited to be here and part of this conversation with y'all.
Thanks, Max. Okay, great. So we're going to dive into some discussion with our panelists. I would love to hear their thoughts on a couple of questions. To get started, let's go deep. Let's get big, or go home. And we're all already home and so sick of being home. So I'm just going to put it right out there and say, in light of the tragedies and the injustices of the past year, police violence and white supremacy manifesting in forms both overt and insidious, impacting BIPOC lives, the COVID-19 pandemic, the resulting quarantines, isolation, backlash from deniers putting us at even more risk, the rise of fascism, the rolling back of rights for so many marginalized communities that we're still grappling with under the transition to the new administration. We're in a position of acknowledging trauma and holding space to process it while it's still taking place. And it feels incredibly challenging. So my question to our panelists is this. As a provider, and considering that so much of mainstream mental health care focuses on internal change rather than critiques of the extremely damaging social environment, what have you found are the most useful approaches in times like this to help your clients or patients? And can and do you apply them to yourself? We hear so much about self-care for social workers, self-care for therapists, self-care for providers. I never want to hear the term self-care again. Oh my God, but we need to talk about it, right? So if anybody would like to take a crack at this, I encourage you to unmute yourself. I see Isabel's hand.
Yeah, I like to just get it over with. So one guiding principle of social work, as many of you know, is the need to acknowledge systems of oppression and actively work towards dismantling those systems. At the same time, helping our clients, arm them with the tools, AKA coping skills, that are going to help them navigate these systems as best as they can. And in a way that builds self-efficacy and a sense of power in a situation, in all of these situations that feel largely out of our control. But before we can do any of that, before any of the coping skills can be done, can be taught, it's so important as a provider to validate our clients' experiences around these societal and systemic issues, right? And forces that impact their mental health and their ability to function in their day-to-day lives. So we need to validate their experiences with racism, with sexism, classism, even with their experiences with poor medical and psychiatric care in the past. We must validate that. Homophobia, transphobia, so that they know that they're not wrong. And I think super important, so that they know they're not crazy. This is actually happening. You are being marginalized. You are being persecuted. These things are happening to you. And there are systems working against you, but also so that they know that they're not alone in this and that they can learn to cope with anything that comes their way with practice and with the right support. So validation is first and foremost. And then just to finish answering your question about the most useful approaches, I would say that everyone is different. So coping skills that work best for me might not work for you. And that's why we need to provide clients with what I call like a menu of options so that they can see which coping skills work best for them, and try different things out, trial and error. So personally, I like relaxation techniques and distraction techniques as my go-to coping skills. However, when we're talking about dealing with feelings resulting from environmental stressors and oppression, I think things like creating action plans or to-do lists or taking concrete steps and actions or planning for them can be very uplifting. So for example, doing an action plan to attend a protest or writing a letter to an elected official about, affordable housing or gun violence or police violence, et cetera, right? These kinds of action plans, these kinds of action steps, I think help people feel like they have some bit of control or impact, over the situations that are occurring around them in the world and the conditions at hand. So yeah, that's what I would say. Different folks, different strokes. So you have to approach each person individually.
Thanks, Isabel. I agree with that. Absolutely, individualized approaches. Do our other panelists have anything to add?
Yeah. So one thing that I've been thinking about a lot and doing in my work a lot lately is that people often will say it's okay when met with any sort of like, I'm sorry this is happening to you, or this is so hard, right? People, especially people who have faced a ton in our lives, will often say, it's okay. We know that we can survive this immediate thing in front of us. We know that we have the emotional strength often to do it. We've done things like it before, but it's not okay. And to name as a clinician that it's not okay, and to make space to really explore and to just sit with that reality that it's not okay. Both what's happening in the world is not okay, and for me with my patients often, like what's happening medically is not okay. And sometimes what's happening in terms of how they're being treated in the hospital is not okay, right? So just creating space for those things to be really named, explored, and honored. And that goes really hand in hand with the next thing, which is sort of the heart of chaplaincy work altogether, which is that we take frustration, grief, and rage really seriously. That there's no easy fix to these feelings, that we have to really allow them to have space to move and get full expression. And that doesn't mean that they're going to go away necessarily. It means that we find ways to live alongside the frustration and grief and the rage that we have, to live in our lives in ways that we want to and are able to live our lives. I think those are the other piece is for me on the other side, when I'm talking with my other teammates, to name the political and social realities that I see impacting the people with whom we're working, and to see what resources we can mobilize within the hospital itself to make sure that people are getting the care and protection they need while they're on our team, under our care.
Thanks, Max. That's really helpful. And I think that kind of speaks to the idea also of it made me think of the idea with grief and loss, also of not being something you're ever going to get over. It's something you learn to live with, right? And that's a really important concept in client work, as well as in our personal lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it really like flies in the face of a lot of stuff around mental health care, which is that we're supposed to like manage ourselves or fix ourselves so we can be healed, so we can be functional. But like you were saying, Isabel, like a lot of it is about like figuring out how to effectively navigate the situations that we're in so that we can like be in our lives in the ways that we want to be in our lives.
I want to go next.
Go for it, please.
Yeah. Isabel and Max had great things to say, and I definitely agree with both of them. And I want to add on to those things. So when I meet with peers for peer mental health counseling, some things that we work on in addition to validating their experience is a motivational interviewing exercise called evoking. And we focus on like trying to take their power back and empowerment and through that exercise. And then at the end of us meeting, we do empowerment strategies and coping skills. So, yes, these systems are oppressive and they weigh us down, but how can we still take care of ourselves and actionable steps, like Isabel said, to make us feel good in the moment, do what we can to overcome them.
Thanks, Jia. I really like a lot of the tenets of motivational interviewing. I find them they're very client-centered, and they come in handy in almost any kind of setting. Geleni, did you want to speak on this?
Yeah, just ditto everybody, and grateful for all the wisdom. I think about this all the time. I really do. And I think that one of the things that certainly complicates things for all of us is that, we're in a capitalist system that doesn't uphold the humanity of people, particularly for BIPOC folks, for poor folks, for people who are marginalized in a lot of different ways and live very intersecting lives throughout those identities. It's very hard to see ourselves as being valued by the systems that are in place that are created to oppress us to begin with. And I think that this is the ongoing, the ongoing oppression of trying to care for ourselves in the midst of that is its own thing. And I think that's something that really is challenging. I know that when I've been with groups, something that's a tool that's really helped us is to create pod maps. And this is an exercise that came out of the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective. And we would just create like a physical map with little circles, and the idea is you're filling the circles with the names of people, organizations, collectives, groups that can help you in particular kinds of emergencies. And it's basically safety planning, but it's a very visual, exercise. But that sense also of doing that as communities and not only as individuals, I think is something that's really helpful. I did that with a group of 10 people. And then it was something that everybody continued to add on to. It was a living Google document, and I think that seeing each other demonstrate that for ourselves, that kind of care, breaks isolation in a way that I think is really crucial for folks. I also just want to uplift Patty Byrne, who is a disability justice activist who's been doing incredible work for a long time and is the founder of Sins Invalid, who talked about very recently an event about how important it is to just simply normalize having needs. Just make it normal to be talking about how are you right now and what do you need in this moment in order to share space, conversation, energy. And I think for those of us that are involved in things like collectives, group work, who have some control over the structure of those communications, we can do that. We can create guidelines for how we're going to have meetings, so that people feel like they can really be embodied in that meeting, really bring their full selves. And I think that really helps a lot. And the idea, I think some of the principles of disability justice are so important that we really move at the pace of the slowest person, that you move together so that we're not constantly in this race of productivity that doesn't honor who we are and the fact that we are people who are surviving this moment that's unprecedented for any of us in our lifetimes anyway. And putting things in that context makes a difference. Something that I know has been helpful for me is simply recognizing, doing like a daily journal activity that's like recognizing the examples of my wellness right now, because I'm so well aware of my unwellness, but now let me recognize I was able to do these things today. These are things that were meaningful to me, even in small ways. And that's, I think, something that makes a really big difference and puts things into a context, remembering that context that we're in this state of constant emergency right now. So how do we create safety in different moments and then link those moments together in a chain, and help to grow that into something that is significant for us on an ongoing basis. And yeah, those are things that I think about. And I think especially for all of us who are survivors, who are BIPOC folks, who are first generation migrants, any of us that have bootstrap mentality kind of built into our childhood and our adulthood, being able to challenge that, being able to do that for each other and with each other, and internally creating those messages in a conscious way that really say, okay, there's more beyond this. Yeah.
Geleni, I love everything you just said. All of this is so beautifully expressed. And I was going to actually ask you to dive a little further into your holistic approach to healing with community members. I also wanted to say that, I was just thinking in terms of coping strategies right now, that engaging in mutual aid efforts is, it's been crucial for so many during the past year, right? I know that I find for me, letting myself be cared for as well as caring for others has been really crucial. And whether that means exchanging meals with community members when one of us is feeling more well than another, or has extra, or just wants to share, goes a really long way. I've been adjusting to chronic illness that has been exacerbated, I think, by the social isolation and the circumstances of the pandemic, the agita of the past year, and all of this makes a lot of sense. I think about spoon theory, which I sense is something that you think about as well. The idea of having, if people aren't familiar with this already, the idea of having a limited amount of physical or mental energy to expend each day, using the idea of spoons as units of energy. The other things in terms of self-care that I think of are, if you are working in an environment where you're given paid time off, is not being shy about using the paid time off for mental health days. If you are a helping professional, you might feel like you don't have the right to take the paid time off or use the mental health days. Or if you're not a helping professional, you might feel that way too, right? Take the paid time off, take the mental health days. It's so important. Ask for institutional support in the workplace.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Teresa, as a supervisor, as a director, I actually can see it in some of my staff when they kind of short notice want to take time off. They'll say, is it okay? They really sound so worried that I'm going to say no. And I'm so happy to always say yes. Why say no to somebody asking for time off? For what reason would I do that?
Yeah. I'm sure that whatever all of us in this room do, none of us are getting paid enough. I'm sure. Also, take a media diet. This is something I try so hard to remind myself to do that, because it's something I work with clients to do. Don't overwatch the news. Don't overread the news. I feel like January 6th was kind of the exception to this, when we were all glued to the news. I was like, okay, everybody gets a free pass. But aside from that, the media diet feels really important as a care tool, as a coping strategy. Okay, anyway, I do want to move on with the questions. Geleni, I wanted to pitch it back to you to talk about your approach to healing with community members, the modalities you practice, and how those can not only benefit our mental health, but really help us all work towards healing justice. Could you speak a little bit more on that?
Sure. The modality that I practice primarily right now is acupuncture and East Asian medicine. And by nature, and I know that there's folks like Cyan here, who's studying acupuncture right now, and it's part of a lineage of Cyan's family. And I know others of us have had acupuncture or have gone to see practitioners. And what I value about it so much is that the approach is very much understanding that we're all connected, but that we're also each individually our own landscape. And that's so valuable, holding those truths at the same time and not seeing them as opposites, but really seeing the connection between them. So it means that when someone comes to see me or another healer, that they can be addressing things having to do with mental health, physical health, pain, isolation, trauma, things that are autoimmune issues, injury, all of those different things, because there's the understanding that none of us are just one single experience, in that list. We all can mark a lot of those different things on a piece of paper if we're asked about our health history. And when folks fill out that piece of paper, when I'm going to see them, they often say, oh, this is too much. And they don't realize I'm there going, oh, yes, this is good. This is the web of who you are, that creates the wonder of who you are and the wisdom and the genius of who you are. And it's an honor to work with that. So I feel like the traditions of medicine that I practice really do, honor that sense. And it means that there's so many different ways of being in such a good way impactful in someone's life. And I think that in general, and I see this with a lot of different kinds of healing, but something that I think is really amazing is that for anyone who's dealing with multiple struggles, whether it be illness, trauma, all kinds of things, and feeling like each one is like a domino hitting the next one, and just creating this chain reaction that is feeling decimating to them, I mean, that's a very true experience, and it's true for some of us. But it's also true that within each one of those experiences, if there's one thing that can be eased, if together we can co-create ease in that one place, then the next thing can take on some of that ease, et cetera, et cetera. And it creates a different kind of matrix of support and care. So I think that that kind of possibility is something that makes a big difference. And that's a general statement, but I see that being true about a lot of different caring professions. So I think that that's something that's really important, and it changes that narrative of, being ruined. I can't offer anything else. There is nothing left of me. And in fact, oh no, there's so much that's there. There's so much possibility there. Yeah, so those are some things I think about. And yeah, I think especially as the spring's coming, it brings those things to mind too. How things can be covered up by the snow that we had just a little while ago. And that's just nourishing the seeds, germinating underneath. So what's possible? What's next coming up? And exploring those possibilities, it makes a difference, and it helps us stay alive.
Thank you. What a hopeful note to move on to Jia with. Thank you. Jia, I'd love to hear more about your work with Fearless Femme 100 during the pandemic. If you could talk a little more about how peer support has behooved the queer and trans BIPOC communities with which you've worked.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. So just to give folks some context, we offer peer mental health services, which includes workbooks and resources and workshops and events, and individual peer counseling. This is a COVID-19 response project, and we actually began right after the pandemic started. We started March 29, 2020, and offered peer mental health counseling individually for 6 months, and then a 6-month stretch of workshops, events, and support groups. I think that it didn't just behoove the cutie BIPOC community. I think it behooved the mental health care industry where we are. I'm in New York City. We're in New York City, and I think there isn't much value placed on lived experience as there is on institutional power and credentials and credentialism. We still sometimes use that to comply with the law, but we also believe in decolonizing and politicizing mental health, which means that we talk more about the oppressive systems that affect our peers. We don't call them clients. We like to call them peers. We speak about that often and advocate for them often, where that doesn't usually happen in other settings. I think it's validating for a lot of people that we serve. We've served over 1,600 people with services. It's very validating to have someone who is queer and or trans and a BIPOC person who can talk about their mental health with, and come from a place of lived experience and have that be powerful and validating. So yeah.
I don't want to use too much clinical jargon here, but that's freaking awesome. Thank you so much. And and that's a really important differentiation. I'm glad you led with that about the impact. It's not just for QT BIPOC peers, it's for mental health systems of care in general when you provide this kind of connection and service.
Mm-hmm.
So really incredible. Would you be amenable to putting a link in the chat? I'm sorry, I'm completely putting you on the spot. But if you feel up to it at some point during the event, if people want more information, please feel free. I'll put it that way. Jia, did you want to say anything else, or shall I move on to Max?
Yes, I think I just wanted to say one more thing. There's a statistic out there that only like less than 10% of mental health professionals are people of color or Black, even. So there's a whole gap in people who are not receiving care from other people who look like them. And a lot of what stands in the way is credentials and institutions that make it hard for BIPOC communities to get those credentials and to offer those services. So that's why I think lived experience is very powerful, is because you get to, for lack of a better term, skirt around that and still provide quality care.
Jia, do the peer counselors have to get certified as peer specialists? Is that how the sort of workaround works? Do you mean?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes, for insurance reasons, they do.
Okay. This is good to know. Thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So Max, I'm going to move on to you and just ask if you would talk a little bit more about spiritually informed approaches to queer coping in light of the many traumatic events over the past year and the trauma that so many of us are continuing to experience.
Absolutely. Thank you. I want to go back. I artfully dodged the "do you do this" part of the last question. I'm really A+ at being like, I'm fine, it's okay, which I think is why I've latched on to the like, it's not okay thing so keenly. So it's a struggle for me to not be okay and to allow myself to voice that. And I've noticed that's one of the impacts of the pandemic is that I've really my friendship groups have gotten a lot smaller and tighter. And now they're like almost all people who I can say I'm not okay to and will respond in kind. So this week on Wednesday was like an awful day. It was just like a lot of really brutal things at work happened. I've been commuting through this whole pandemic to the hospital that I work at. And so I took a bath, which then made me feel sadder because then I had a body again. And I was like, that sucks. It was supposed to help. And then texted a friend to be like, I don't know how to eat right now. Can you just talk me through turning on my light in my bedroom and figuring out dinner, and was able to move through that with a friend. And I just feel so grateful to myself for cultivating friendships that I can be like not that functional in. And so grateful to my friends that they are good at being like, a smoothie and toast is a great dinner. So yes and no is my answer to that question. Do I do this myself?
Fair enough.
Yeah. So coping. I'm going to start by saying that I know that religion and spirituality are really touchy topics for us in queer and trans community. A lot of us, myself included, have experienced religious trauma, and, you know, the world is what it is, and we continue to face religious oppression daily and like mounting of it. And I think that's like especially clear to us as we're facing a lot of like really violent anti-trans legislation coming down the pipeline at us right now. So that's one piece. Another piece is that when I think about spirituality, I often couple it with existential, and so like existential and spiritual coping, existential and spiritual needs. And the intent here is that we're really talking about anything that is in the universe of like meaning making. Who am I in the world? What does it mean to be a person in the world? Who and what am I connected to? So like things that help me to go deeper inside myself and also to reach outside of myself, either to community or to nature or to God, if you're a theistic person, or to the universe, like whatever that is for you, right? To ancestors. There's lots of ways that we can name what this terrain is. And sort of like medium sciencey is that we know that like meaning making activities, that when we have trauma, or we're experiencing trauma, meaning making activities help to sort of like mediate the impacts of that trauma on us, right? To help us be a little more able to face every day, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about different kinds of different areas of coping strategies, not necessarily in the weeds about like things to do, but like areas that we might think of as existential or spiritual coping strategies. So one is about personal practices. So that might be like an artistic or creative practice. It might be a ritual practice or prayer or spells, gratitude, meditations, ancestor practices and altar buildings, healing practices generally are all part of this, and things that we do to structure our time, right? So built-in breaks, or for me, Shabbat, or holidays, right? For me, like yard sites, that like death anniversaries are really important for marking. And this is all in the terrain of the personal, right? So what are the things that help me to just sort of like give myself space to be in my head and heart and self, my thoughts, my universe? And then there's an aspect of this all that's about community of meaning. So this is like any community where a central aspect of it is building a vision for being in this world and supporting both individual and collective being, right? We might get that from queer and trans community. We might get that from artistic community. We might get it from religious or spiritual community, from our activist organizations and community buildings. There's lots of places that we can get this. So for example, my communities like this are my writing group, the What Would a HIV Doula Do collective, and my synagogue. And then also part of this is structured time, because you know, holidays, all of the celebrations we do, Pride, the first nice weekend at Reese, like these are all giant communal celebrations that help us to connect to each other. And though Zoom is like not my favorite way of accessing community, and it feels like sort of a abbreviated, or like it's not as hearty, right? I can't touch people. I can't be hugged. I'm not like a big hugger, but like it turns out touch is important. So like being able to access these things on Zoom has actually turned out to be way more important to me now, a year later, than I would have said it was a year ago when this was all starting. two more areas of existential and spiritual coping. So one is supporting and developing beliefs and ideas. So this could be through study of religious or spiritual texts specifically. It can be through fiction, books like Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown, or Care Work by Leah Lakshmi Pyapshna Samarasinha, Beyond Survival by Leah Lakshmi and Ajaris Dixon, things that sort of give us a sense of like what is possible in this world, right? What is the world that we're building? And where do I fit in it, right? And where does my community fit in it? I think in this a lot about Octavia Butler and the parables of the sowers, and the way that those earth seed excerpts can be pieced together into like really central meaning making texts. And then learning in community is also part of this. So in Judaism, we have this idea of a chavruta. It's like a best friend study partner. And your job is to like really get in there and like interrogate texts together, but also to like interrogate ourselves, not in a like mean way, right? But in a like building our best selves up kind of way. And part of that can be being accountability buddies too, right? Did you do the studying that you said you were going to do? But also like you said you wanted to try this other day, and now I see you doing the opposite thing. Let's talk about it, because like that's the relationship we have, right? So that kind of study and engagement can really help like make our minds and our hearts a lot more vibrant, right? It gives us energy to go on. And then the last dimension of coping is about emotional expression. So any practices that we do that's explicitly about naming and expressing our emotions individually or communally. And that could be like your therapy. It could be talking to your friends. It could be singing in your shower, or going to karaoke, like anything where, or like dancing, right? Anything where like the real thing that you're doing, and you're doing it with this intention, is like, I've got some feelings and I need to move them, right? So I like to go to the beach and cry, like whatever it is that like helps the emotion flow. Yeah. So those are some snippets of existential and spiritual coping.
Thank you so much. That's
Yeah.
great stuff. A lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
If you are up for it, would you mind putting some of those book suggestions into the chat for folks?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Max. That would be great. We are at a bookstore after all. Just saying. So my final question is for Isabel. We would love to hear about a little more about the mental health programs and the approaches with which you've worked, especially the recovery model and the coping skills training. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Sure. I'd love to tell you about the program that I currently direct at the Bridge. It's located on the Upper West Side. And just first of all, the Bridge is an organization that serves people with mental health and substance abuse disorders in a variety of ways, including housing, care coordination, substance abuse treatment, and mental health treatment. So my program is called PROS, which stands for Personalized Recovery-Oriented Services. And PROS is basically a psychiatric rehabilitation program. So it helps folks living with severe and persistent mental illness identify and achieve one or more life role goals. So the life role goals fall into 4 different areas. So living and housing, education, employment, and relationships. So the PROS model is strengths-based. And one of the first things that happens when someone starts receiving services at PROS is they go through a few assessments with their assigned counselors. And during that time, participants begin to, and we call them participants, begin to identify their strengths and their barriers, as well as areas of life that they would like to improve and attain like a specific outcome in. So for example, a person might identify that they would like to go back to work, or they would like to go back to school. So they would establish a goal around that in their treatment plan, which they create collaboratively with their individual counselor. We also do a lot of group work. It's a very group based, it's a very group heavy model. So one critical step and helping participants identify their strengths and what gets in there. One critical step is having them identify their strengths, right? As well as what gets in their way. And then we can start to think about what interventions and what coping skills can be used in order to manage and address those specific barriers. So for example, if someone suffers with severe anxiety, that's the barrier, right? And they have an artistic talent or an interest, well, that could be considered the strength. So we think about ways in which that talent or interest can be utilized in a coping technique. So it's a lot of what Max was talking about in a way that works for the participant. Coping skills training is just one of our services. We offer many, many services, and it's offered individually and in a group format. So something we might do is help someone create what's called a RAP plan, and it stands for Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And that outlines all of the warning signs, all of your triggers, everything that kind of precedes an acute emotional, acutely emotional distressing situation. And as well as it lists out the coping skills and the responses that a person, while they're in their sort of wise mind, if you will, where they're in their rational sort of state, they create this plan so that when, because one thing that happens is a lot of times we develop these coping skills, we learn how to do these things, and then they fly right out the window the second that we have some sort of acute emotional distress, maybe a major trigger comes along that we didn't anticipate. And so that's why developing these tools, actual tools, like tangible things, can help people, because in a moment of sort of panic, they only need to know that they need to locate their RAP plan. And that will sort of help guide them through the situation. So a couple of different coping skills that we talk about. One of the coping skills, or one of the areas of coping skills I think we've talked a little bit about, is self-soothing. So engaging your five senses, which we're gonna go through an activity, in just a little bit that is going to involve that. But engaging your senses as a way of sort of grounding. So that could be something as simple as like a tactile, like feeling something soft, or hugging a teddy bear. Or smelling like lavender, like a specific candle. These things have a way of grounding us when we're having some sort of emotional, a peak, if you will. And then there's one of my favorites, which is distraction. And believe it or not, everybody is an excellent coper when it comes to using Hulu and Netflix, because believe it or not, you are using a coping skill, which is called distraction. And basically it's anything, puzzles, a baking show, reading, talking to a friend, literally anything can be a distraction. And I guess the one thing I would caution is you don't necessarily want to stay in distraction forever. Because that can be a bit of that can cause its own problems, right? Because if you're in distraction forever, then that means you're not doing all the self-care things that you need to be doing to actually take care of yourself. So distraction in periods of time. And then I talked a little bit about DBT, or I made a mention of a DBT thing, but one thing you guys might have heard of is opposite action. So doing the opposite of what your impulses are telling you to do when you're experiencing acute or just bothersome symptoms. So for example, if you're feeling depressed and your instinct is to isolate and stay in your room all day and not get out of bed, well, one opposite action might be to get up and walk into the living room, or to call a friend, or to write an email, because the instinct was to isolate. So engaging in the opposite action. And it's just like that thought of like, if you smile, then there's a chemical reaction that happens, right? It's the same thing with this. If you engage in the opposite action, the feelings start to change. And there is a physiological change that starts to happen. And then mindfulness, which I think Max, talked a lot about as well. So this could be meditation, prayer, visualization, breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, which is tensing and releasing your muscles, you know, kind of in a body scan sort of way. And then finally, crisis planning, I think, is really important. And basically what I was talking about with the RAP plan, which is just what happens when all of your go-to coping skills don't work in the moment and you really feel like you're in crisis. What is the ultimate last thing you do? And that's where you'll look at your crisis plan, and that will have phone numbers of family members or friends that you have identified that you can call during these situations, or hotlines. It has step by step. When this happens, when I start to look like X, Y, and Z, I will do, you know, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's basically that's coping skills training, is basically being very systematic about. It's sort of like, the idea is that I think a lot of the people in our audience maybe were taught some of these coping skills, perhaps, if you're lucky. A lot of the people I work with were never, you know, taught any of these coping skills, right? And in fact, now they're teaching some of these things in school, and most of us didn't get taught these things. They weren't part of our curriculum. So right now it's about, you know, a lot of this stuff might seem like, oh, I know about that. A lot of the people I work with, they didn't know about that, and they didn't know all, you know, that you can systematically approach coping. So I can go on and on forever, but I know we're like pretty much running out of time. So,
but thank you, Isabel. This is fantastic information. I want to let folks know RAP plan templates are available online. You can Google RAP, W-R-A-P template, and you can find a blank RAP plan if you want to check that out.
and just one more thing, Teresa, in our program, we often will use our peer specialists to work one-on-one with people to develop a RAP plan individually. It really works well with a peer specialist because they have that lived experience and they can talk with the person and say, well, these are some of the things that have worked for me.
Yes, exactly. Same thing at our PROS program. My agency, SPOP, has a PROS program as well. It's the only geriatric PROS program in the state. I always want to say country, but that's a lie. The only geriatric PROS program in the state, which is kind of how I ended up connecting with Isabel to do this panel tonight. That being said, I do want to move us along because we are running over. If folks can stay for a little bit longer, I'm going to turn this over to Geleni for the tapping / acupressure mini session, which I'm so excited about. And then if we have time, if there are any questions, we'll field a couple of those. Sound good? I'm mostly asking Greg, who's giving the thumbs up, so that's great. Okay, Geleni, over to you. Thank you so much for staying on. You're muted.
I did it.
Now you're not
doing that. I'm the one who did it. I'm sorry. Okay, but here I am. You can all hear me now. I just want to start by adding something, a link in the chat. This is a link to the Collective Care Fund of Third Root Community Health Center. I just want to mention that because this is a means for us to offer low to no cost care for Black, Indigenous, people of color folks, prioritizing people in Flatbush, Brooklyn, residents in that community, which is the Third Root community, and also trans women and femmes and disabled and formerly incarcerated community members. So if anyone's interested in giving a donation there, it helps to support offering those free and low cost services. So thank you. And I want to just lift up one more thing. I'm really excited to be featured in Cyan's book, and Cyan is here. Our work is everywhere, an illustrated oral history of queer and trans resistance by Cyan Rose. And it's available April 6th through the Bureau's bookstore. And as mentioned, it's going to be on sale. It is on sale now, 15% off pre-orders. And I'm just going to put the link. And I know other folks' books are on sale as well. And I'm really excited because I'm going to shop. So, okay, I'm going to add that link as well. Okay, so tapping is a form of acupressure, and acupuncture, of course, is centuries old. Tapping was developed in the 80s, primarily in the 80s, by psychotherapists who had studied East Asian medicine and acupuncture and knew that there were specific functions to these different points that can create different kinds of effects. And what they started to do was experiment with, when they were in session with their patients, particularly who were dealing with acute issues, working with them to create a protocol in which they'd identify the issue and also assess the intensity of it and create an affirmative statement. And as they repeated that statement to themselves out loud or in their heads, they'd go through the process of tapping these different points. And what they found is that people really had some very good experiences doing that, and that it was a protocol, a tool that they could use pretty easily. And there are a lot of places online where you could see information about tapping and lots of YouTube videos, and there's lots of protocols. But I just wanted to lead folks through a simple one that I hope that we can use together. In acupuncture, we use needles to access these points, but we'll just be using our fingertips in order to touch and tap on these points. And so if you take a moment, or actually let me just show the points and then we'll kind of go through the protocol. Let's do that. So the first one here is on the blade edge of your hand. Okay, so if you hold your hand up and you look on the edge here, okay, and you look just below your little finger, there's a kind of bump here in the bone. Just below that, that's a point. And often if you press here, it'll be a little tender. So you could press there for a moment. This is a point that opens up a channel that runs along the center of the back, like a straight line, coming all the way up to the head and to the face. And it's a point that is about addressing the need to move forward. Literally, it's called the governing vessel. It's about moving things forward. So this is very helpful, this point, when we're dealing with any kind of stuckness, which could include a panic attack, anything that has to do with feeling trauma, anxiety, depression, something where you're stuck and you're not moving forward. So a lot of these protocols will start with tapping this point. And the image behind it is, it's almost as if there's a sail that's unfurled from your back and the wind is pushing you, as a boat forward, along the ocean. So if you press here, and I'm tapping like this, okay, you could do it with one fingertip or two. That's the first point. You could try it on the other side. And there are always questions about, like, how hard do you tap? How many times? That's really totally up to you. My cat likes tapping. He's trying to join me. Okay. All of these points are points that we could reach easily. There are going to be 4 of them that we do together today. You could also tap them together. I do this sometimes, almost like I'm clapping hands. Just kind of tap both those areas together. So that's the first one. The second one that I'll show you, you want to be a little less hard and aggressive with, right? It's very gentle. It's going to be right between the eyebrows, the place that we often think of as our third eye. This is a point that's called the Hall of Impression. And it's very much about addressing trauma and about the ways that we are able to see ourselves in the world and in our lives. So this point, oftentimes when people are dealing with anxiety, panic, but also things like insomnia, things that don't let us rest, this is a good point to go to. Okay, and sometimes depending on how I'm feeling, I might just touch and not rub. Sometimes I'll rub, sometimes I'll tap. Okay, so what feels right to you or to the person you're teaching this to, that's the right thing. Okay, so that's the second point. The third point, I'm going to move my screen down. I might need to stop and give my cat a treat. That's what he needs, right? He might not leave me alone. Okay, the next one is at the base of our throat. Okay, a little bit below the little hollow there, right where our collarbone starts. It's often tender, so you want to be aware of that. And it's right here on either side of the sternum, here and here, a couple of inches away. Gonna give him treats. That point is a point that addresses harmonizing the emotions. And in this channel, There are points that go all the way down either side of the sternum that do that. And this is the one that kind of governs all of them. Okay, so tapping here helps to bring balance. It's also about restoring consciousness, bringing us back. There are all these points along the center of the face and the center of the chest that are about bringing us back, from places that are hard, for bringing us back into our bodies. Okay, so tapping here. For some folks, it might feel good to just rub this whole area with a gentle fist, or even just to have like hands pressing and just feel the warmth just absorb into your skin, into that place. Okay, but any of those things are addressing this point. Okay, and then the last one is if you turn your palm out and you go to the crease of your wrist, right where a bracelet would sit, okay, right between your hand and your arm, that part of your wrist. And then you go a couple of inches up. That's a point that opens a channel that goes directly to the heart. So when we're dealing with trauma, with panic, with depression, and actually this is a point that we use even when somebody's dealing with cardiovascular issues, palpitations, et cetera, all of those things, including things like asthma, anything that gets stuck up high in the body. Somebody's panicked and they're stuck up here and they can't bring their shoulders down. All of those things, can't catch their breath. This is a good point. Okay. And again, it can be a tender place. So you want to think about maybe tapping more tenderly, but always go with what feels right to you. You can do it on both sides. Okay. I'm going to quickly talk about what the protocol is and we'll do it. So the protocol is you identify your issue. In my experience working with folks and in my own life, with my family, this works really well with very acute issues. I've used this in intense panic attacks when I thought, oh, right now I feel like I'm dying. I've gone through this and felt a 50% reduction, in that level of intensity. So I find it really good for things like that. It's also something that you can do quickly or you can do slowly, depending on what your circumstances are, and it can still have a good impact. So you want to identify what the issue is. If you can be very specific, that's helpful. And then assessing the intensity and putting it maybe on a scale from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Where do you place it right now? And then creating a statement, and that's an affirmative statement, something along the lines of, even though I experienced this, I love and accept myself completely. Now, that acceptance is something that we may be working on. We might not be there yet, but we're really expressing an intention, in a strong way, as much as we're able to in that moment. So it might be, I'm having a panic attack. Even though I have this panic in this moment, I love and accept myself completely. And then go through all of my points. Okay, and I've done this 4-point protocol specifically for panic, and it's been really helpful. And then saying that statement as you're doing the tapping in your mind or out loud, whatever that statement may be. And then when you come to the end of it, assessing again the level of intensity. And as I mentioned, it's been really helpful for me. It's been helpful for my mother, who deals with very intense chronic pain and also a lot of anxiety, for folks that I know who are dealing with a lot of trauma, and for panic and anxiety attacks in the moment, going through this. So do folks want to go through it one time before we end? Do we have enough time to do that? Okay. All right. So think about something you want to address. And again, it could be something that's acute for you, or it can be something that's longer term, something more chronic. It's very much up to you right now, but think about something you want to address. Okay. And when you land on something that you want to address, then think about a scale and where you would place it on the scale right now. And that scale could be from 1 to 10, and 1 would be, it's the least intense, it's barely noticeable. And 10 would be, this is the worst that you could possibly feel in this experience. Okay, so you know what your issue is, you want to put it on that scale. And once you have a number for yourself, then create that statement. And it could be very brief. It could be, I have this anxiety, but I'm still worthy. Okay, it could be any statement like that. That's a positive affirmative statement for you. Okay, so make that statement in your mind. Could be, even though I have this, fill in the blank. I love and accept myself completely. Okay, think about what that statement is. And now, if you want, you could have yourself muted. You could say that statement out loud, or you could say it in your mind as we go through the points, and I'll prompt you and show you, and you can look at me to see where the next one is, and we'll go in order. Okay? Okay, so begin with your statement. Even though I have this, I love and accept myself completely, or whatever your statement is. Even though I have this, I love and accept myself completely. Even though I have this, I love and accept myself completely. Even though I have this, I love and accept myself completely. Even though I have this, I love and accept myself completely. Even though I have this, I love and accept myself completely. And relax and take a deep breath. And out. Okay, so then you hold up that scale in your mind again, and you think about where you would place your feeling of this experience on a scale from 0 to 10. And in many cases, it'll go down. Sometimes it'll go down by half. And it's something that you can put in your pocket. You can carry it. This belongs to you now. This is part of a tradition of people's medicine. This belongs to you now, and you can teach it to other people. You can teach it to, well, I taught it to my 86-year-old mother who has cancer and who uses it every day. Even points she can't reach, she imagines them in her mind as part of meditation. I taught this to 6-year-olds. It's something that belongs to you and that you can share with others. Thank you for tapping. Thank you.
Geleni, I'm using this on Thursday in my group.
Great. That makes me so happy.
I'm going to do it. Yeah, because I run a coping skills training at 10 and on Thursdays.
Thank you so much.
I'll say one more thing really quickly about it. Something that's so beautiful about it is that you could do it for yourself and you see how it feels. And then you can see how you've done something for yourself that's been helpful. It's empowering in that way. And it's also empowering when you extend that into teaching it to other people. So I just wanted to mention that because, yeah, that's so great. Thank you for telling me that, Isabel.
Oh, thank you so much for teaching me.
Sure.
That was wonderful. So healing and so soothing, and your approach to it is really lovely. I feel like I learned a very similar protocol about 15 years ago under the name Emotional Freedom Technique.
Yeah, it's similar. And yeah, but there are a lot of different protocols. There's longer ones. I did a shorter one for you all today that felt like it was focusing. I wanted to focus more on anxiety, trauma, also just stress and insomnia too. Yeah.
you. So before we wrap up this evening's session, which was it's just been, I don't know about for you, it's been really magical for me. And I just want to thank our panelists so much for their time and energy. I just want to see if there are any questions that have come up that we might address before we say goodnight.
So I don't have a question about this so much, but I am doing a course for my college class, so I do need to have an interview with somebody, and I can do like Zoom if anyone of y'all would be willing.
I didn't catch the end of the question.
I just need to interview somebody for one of my college classes, if anyone of y'all would be willing.
Sure. She wants to interview somebody for her college class, and she wants to know if any of us would be willing.
So if anybody is available for an interview, maybe they can shoot you a message in the Zoom chat.
Yeah, so it would be through Zoom. Maybe like Tuesday afternoon if somebody's free.
Right. So if one of the panelists is available, they can message you in the Zoom chat here in the room. Why don't we do that? Okay.
Teresa, I can't message anyone else besides you and Greg.
Oh, whoops. Greg, can you
Yes.
troubleshoot on this? I don't know what to do.
I can make you all co-hosts. Let me do that.
Okay. And then if there are any other questions for the panelists, I guess now would be the time.
I just wanted to add one more thing. To-do lists. To-do lists are very, very, that is a good coping skill, let me tell you, because the anxiety is just swimming around in your head. It's just all the like to-do list items are just circling around. When you get them out on paper, you can finally breathe. They're not swimming around anymore. They're on paper. You know you're going to get to them. So that's one thing for right now. Everybody's so stressed. They have to schedule doctor's appointments they've been avoiding for a year. You know, there's just so many things going on that really stress us out, that I think that's one of the ones that really is a go-to right now.
Just to piggyback on that, Isabel, I love that. I'm like not really into productivity culture and capitalism, but I am into the Pomodoro technique because I have like the attention span of a fly, especially in these times of ours. And this is a strategy where you just set an alarm for every 25 minutes, and after every 25 minutes, you get a 5-minute break. And then after 4 25-minute and like it's little break sections, you get a longer break. So I just find it really helps with like my inability to self-regulate by like giving me these smaller like sections of regulation. And you just like work through your to-do list in your Pomodoro.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
This is really lovely. Thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
organizing.
thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody.
As challenging as this year has been, it's also given us some good moments. I feel like a feeling just connected to other people and realizing that we need each other. So thank you so much. And I can't wait to be in the same room with you all. It will happen this year, I think.
Looking forward.
So thank you so much, Teresa, for pulling this together, and thank you to all of the panelists. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to post this on YouTube. So if you know anyone who missed it and wanted to see it, it will be on the Bureau's YouTube channel. So check that out, please. And I hope we'll see you at some virtual events of the Bureau's coming up. Next one is next Saturday, polyparenting.
Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you,
night, all.
community. Take care.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Max.